We wanted to cover today some career counseling trait-oriented theories. So this is the concept of really matching yourself to a work environment or a work career. I'm going to cover some background here. Basically, the vocational counseling movement started in the late 20th century. It is this concept of, again, helping people find careers that suit them and that they're going to be successful within. So Frank Parsons, again, the father of counseling, really began the career counseling process and kind of the counseling methods with this idea of matching people to their careers and helping them in that process of finding their career. It also came out of the measurement movements. This is basically the empirical, scientific based that we can research each other, we can research aspects of each other and measure aspects of each other. So that's kind of the concept there, that we're looking at pieces and factors and aspects of ourselves that we can empirically measure and get consistent results over time, right? So that is part of this as well. So the trait and factor theory, again, this is Parsons' vocational counseling approach. So this is his theory that he was using in counseling at the time. The idea is to match individual traits. So these are aspects of your personhood, your unique way of being with the world, and then you're matching that with requirements of the occupation or the job that you're considering. So basically, there's really these three pieces. So you're going to study and assess the individual person, the client in front of you, and then you're going to look at the career information that you have, and then you're going to try to match that person with an occupation that's going to fit their particular personality, their particular aptitudes, their particular abilities, right, in completing that job. So it relies pretty heavily on assessing those things. Aptitude is basically the idea that you can learn tasks. It's not necessarily that you already have the information and knowledge now to do those tasks, but that you are able to learn them. So you can assess that. Abilities is basically a performance assessment, something that you can do now, that you're able, the knowledge and have the skills to do now. Values, again, is your concept of kind of your world schema and what you value and prioritize and how you make decisions in the world. And traits is your personality. So again, that's the pieces and aspects of yourself, your behavior patterns that are consistent over different environments. So those are the things that we're looking at as far as assessing individuals. It's a lot of things to look at. And then the idea is that you are looking for a career that fits that. So there's some assumptions here that you can have a best ideal career, and that there is one career goal that's best suited for you. And then you have those measured abilities that we can measure those, and we're going to make decisions based off of those. There is some criticism that it relies heavily on assessments. There's some criticism out there on those different assessments. It does not account for changes over time. So basically, is based on the premise that these traits are going to be, these personality traits are going to be static because they don't change. It doesn't account for development or changes in people, as well as some of the other theories. So those are some pieces to consider in working in this kind of trait factor matching model, to account for some of those as you're looking at your clients more holistically. So person environment correspondence, again, is a matching model. So that's why it's here. Person environment correspondent is known by lots of different names. So person environment fit is another way that I've heard that said. And theory of work adjustment is also person environment fit. So those sort of things are all similar, but the idea is you're wanting to assess that interaction with the environment, and environmental pieces also are a big part of work satisfaction. So that's kind of the idea here. So the background is in the early 1990s. It's a matching model. It kind of came out of that trait factor model and kind of was a shift to include some of those work factors as well. We're going to talk about those. The theory of work adjustment and Holland's vocational personality theory are types of person environment fit theory. So we're going to look at both of those. The assumptions within this paradigm of theories is that you're striving to achieve and maintain a positive relationship, positive experience within work. So you want to have a good experience working. You want to enjoy work to some extent. You want to feel successful. You want to feel like you're important there. You know, those things are important. Those needs that you have as a person are being met by your career. So that's a big part of this. And then that job satisfaction is an indicator that you have adjusted to your work environment, that your work environment is a good fit for meeting the needs that you have, right? So those, that reciprocal process is really important within this theory, that both the work environment influences that job satisfaction and also your personhood influences that work satisfaction, right? So job satisfaction is also an indicator of your perception of your work environment, and also your ability to stick with that work environment or to be promoted within that work environment. So how successful you are going to be within the work environment. If you're not happy, right, you're not going to necessarily want to stay there, or you may not necessarily put in as much effort to be promoted, right? So there's those pieces of job satisfaction plays a role in how well you're doing in that environment. It accounts for human interaction. So again, that process, that it's not just a one-time decision and then you're good. It's a process of lots of different variables that are playing a role in how satisfied you are, how happy you are with that situation. So there's sources of satisfaction, there's sources of dissatisfaction that are contributing, right? And then you're also talking about, you know, those rewards or stressors. Those are oftentimes pieces of satisfaction, dissatisfaction, and other psychological factors that also play a role in here. So it's looking at your environment and how that is going to interact with you as a person holistically. And then in order to survive, there needs to be some kind of congruence, some kind of correspondence that your needs are being met, right? So this is kind of a Maslow's hierarchy of needs in some ways. You want to definitely look at that. You're going to look at those other needs assessments. That is kind of the basic one that you're going to be making sure your needs are met. Some stages within these approaches are very similar. That's why there's kind of the 7-stage model, that you're going to have that intake interview where you gather lots of information. You're going to be looking at that person and kind of what they're needing from that counseling session. You're going to go over kind of the process, what you're going to be doing as a counselor, kind of that looks like, to orient them to counseling. There's going to be some definitely looking at different pieces as you're listening to your client about their development, their identity, their personhood, their personality, and you're listening for those variables, right, in those intake interviews and those beginning sessions. And then you're going to perform some sort of assessment, right? So oftentimes those are your needs, values, attitudes, performance traits, those sorts of assessments that you're going to be looking at who this person is and what is a good fit for them. So you're going to look at also some barriers or some situations that may be problematic in their process of going about their career, and look at those and how they may go about them. So that might be financial constraints, that might be physical constraints, that might be all kinds of different things, discrimination, systemic problems, looking at all the pieces of that and the barriers that might get them hung up as they go about choosing a career and matching and finding that career. Then you're going to have that person environment fit analysis, which because it basically is that conversation about the assessment results, what you're seeing, what you're hearing, and the work information that you have. So you'll have lots of resources as far as kind of what this work choice might look like, what career that might look like. And you're going to discuss all the pieces of that so that they can have a lot of information in order to make that decision. Confirm, explore, decide. Again, that is looking at that particular career. They're going to pick one or two maybe to look into further and explore that information that they may need in that and kind of how to go about that, and then to make that decision. The follow-up is can include lots of things, such as like helping them with the job search, helping them network, helping them with resumes, applications, things like that. And also it's just kind of that wrap up of, you know, where they are and whether or not they're needing any other services, those sorts of things. So it's again an assessment of where they are after they've kind of started some steps down that path of finding that career. Personality traits, I wanted to get a little bit into that. There's some, like I said, some criticism of trait analysis, because traits can be reductionistic in some ways, that you're not looking at the holistic pieces of a lot of things. You're just looking at parts of individuals and not necessarily the whole environment that they are in or the development. So I wanted to kind of focus on what a trait is, but basically it's several different definitions, but the idea is that it's stable across time and situations. So it should be fairly stable across time and situations. I believe that they shift somewhat. And so that might be something that I'm a little biased on. I feel like that sometimes your personality can shift over time, particularly if you are in environments where you're compensating a lot for those particular traits. You may learn to be more comfortable with a different trait, right? But they're typically stable across time and situations. So I would be kind of reacting and behaving the same way at home as I do at work, as I do in a social environment. So those things would be similar. And then if I take a trait assessment today and I take it 10 years from now, it should be similar, right? That's the idea of what a trait is. Gordon Allport is like the founder of trait theory. He came up with a bazillion different traits of personality, and those have been narrowed down by different assessments over time. So you can assess for different things that aren't, I think it was a list of almost 200 or something. I don't know, it was a long list. He identified 8 criteria for what a trait needs to be. A trait has more than a nominal existence, it doesn't just happen once, that you can assess it over time, and it can be assessed, right? A trait is more than a generalizable habit. It's kind of a core of who you are, right? It's dynamic, determinative. So basically the idea is that you can predict how someone's going to behave, possibly by the trait that they have. Its existence can be assessed empirically, right? You can take the assessment multiple times and have the same trait come up on that assessment. Traits are relatively independent of each other. So again, you can have different aspects of yourself that aren't necessarily impacted by the other one. So you can have different combinations of those aspects of people. And we'll get into that more as you talk about the different trait assessments and the different trait theories. You'll kind of see how that works. A personality trait is psychological. It's not a moral quality. So it's not like this right or wrong necessarily. It's not a concept of that good and bad. Moral quality is more of that values system that we have. So there can be some right and wrong within our value systems, but psychologically, how we act and behave in the world is not necessarily a right or wrong. It's just different ways of being. Acts and habits that are inconsistent with a trait are not proof that the trait does not exist. So just because, for example, I may be introverted and that's the trait that I am typically when I get assessed right, doesn't mean that I can't go be social, that I can't socially interact with people and be competent socially. But that doesn't take away, once I've done that, doesn't mean I'm not introverted anymore, because I can socialize with others, right? Or those sorts of things, or I can be energized by a conversation. So that is kind of his concepts of what a trait is. Pragmatically though, if we're looking at traits, you're just talking about the idea that your personality, there's different aspects to it that we can assess, and that they're going to be the same across different situations and across time. So otherwise they wouldn't be relevant to assess, right? Some commonly used trait theories and assessments: Holland's typology, we're going to talk about in depth a little bit. Hung's personality typology is another common one. It's assessed by the Myers-Briggs type indicator oftentimes, or there's lots of free ones out there that are probably less empirically supported, but they're out there you can use online. There's kind of a following of Hung's personality typology. And then the 5-factor model, or Big Five, is oftentimes used in career assessment as well, and it's assessed by the Nia Pre. We're going to talk about it a little bit as well. So the theory of work adjustment, again, talking about traits and environment fit. I'm going to jump in a little bit back. So the emphasis on adjusting to your work environment, and that adjustment is easier if those particular traits and abilities are a good fit for that environment. It's a process model, so it's talking about how this fit is achieved and maintained. So you have some adjusting to do. So either you're going to shift who you are, you may have to learn and get trained in order to fit better, or you may ask your employer to give you a flexible schedule, right? So the schedule or the work environment fits you better, right? So there might be some shifts on either side. So either, if you're satisfied with your work environment, right, then you're going to want to stay. If you're not satisfied, then you're not going to necessarily want to stay, or you're going to want something to change, is kind of the idea. So it's a predictive model, right? So you're, there may be some pieces that you're looking for or needs that are being met with your environment. So as long as you're satisfied with those needs are being satisfied with your work environment, you're going to be okay. You're going to adjust well. And then also if you fit that work environment, your abilities, values, and traits, your clients' abilities, values, and traits fit their environments, then there'll be more job satisfaction within that model. So let me look at this a little bit. So as far as personality style, so it's talking about like your approach to situations, and an approach to adjusting is really what it's a lot like. So it's talking about these 4 different aspects there. So celerity is basically how one responds to situations, the speed at which you interact with the environment, right? Celerity is, you can be quick to respond to those things, quick, impulsive, or you can be slow and more conscientious, right? So there's that piece. Pace refers to the intensity of how you respond to your environments, whether you're really intense or kind of more laid back kind of pace with the things that are going on in your environment. Rhythm tends to talk more about the pattern of your responses to your environment, steady versus cyclic or erratic, right? That rhythm of how you're doing those tasks within your environment. And then endurance is how persistent you are with that. So those are moderators in how well you're adjusting to those environments. And then, again, your environment is going to be interacting with that. So some environments respond better to different personality styles, right? So emergency room, you may want somebody that's very quick and impulsive, but maybe doesn't have that endurance piece, right? Because yeah, it's different situations will call for different needs there as well. Some key points, again, work, personality, environment should be agreeable to each other. That's the idea. And individual needs are the most important in determining the fit. So as long as your needs are being met by your work environment, you're more likely to be satisfied, right? And individual needs are also a reinforcer system to characterize sustainability, right? So if your system is reinforcing you, then you're more likely to be sustained there. Your job placement is best accomplished through a match of the traits and the work environment. So those are the big pieces. Again, it's a matching model. There are 6 core values within the theory work adjustment model, and these are important to kind of know about and kind of assess for. And there's different assessments for different values, so it's kind of important that you know that there's different pieces here that can be looked at. But the 6 core values here are achievement, which is having one's feeling or sense of accomplishment. Comfort, just your ability to feel less stressed. Comfort seeking, right? Like I'm feeling comfortable, I'm happy with where I'm at. Status is that attention, praise, right? Recognition for what we're doing. Appreciation can kind of fit in there as well. Altruism, that's the idea that we're serving or contributing to something, the environment, community, whatever, to the greater good. Safety, again, that's security, predictability of your work environment, stable, ordered, secure. Autonomy is having that sense of control, freedom, kind of independence. So those different values will line up differently for different people and in different environments, right? And sometimes they conflict with each other. So that can be an issue that you're going to be looking at, is maybe their work environment has some autonomy, but maybe not as much stability, right? So they might have tons of freedom on their schedule, but they may not have a stable work situation, right? So it's looking at those pieces and what they're really needing and making sure those needs and values are being met within that. Okay, so satisfaction promotes maintenance behavior. Basically, this is the idea is if nothing's working, if it's not broke, don't fix it, right? So if things are going well, they're going to continue to maintain the behavior that they're having, right? They're enjoying their job, they're going to continue what they're doing. Dissatisfaction motivates adjustments. So either you're going to adjust your environment, you're going to say, I need a raise, or I need some time off, or I need, a different schedule, or I need something from my environment that I'm not getting, or you are going to change yourself to fit the environment. So I may need to go get some training. I may need some counseling to help deal with emotional stuff. I may need some mentorship. So it's changing themselves to better fit the environment. It's adjusting themselves. So you either adjust the environment or adjust the person to fit the environment. Unsatisfactory, that's basically your employer is unsatisfied with the employee, right? They may need to increase their skills or knowledge to meet the demands of the job. They may have to lower the environment's expectations possibly for them as well. So you may get like a demotion or a moved career too. So that might help with that unsatisfactory piece of that. So you may ask them to lower the expectations. So assessment within this model, there's lots of different assessments. Again, there's many out there. These are just some common ones. The Minnesota Importance Questionnaire measures needs and values. ONET has this kind of values assessment as well. So that's a good one to know. The value cord sort is based on that as well. So that's a free paper version. You can cut out the little cards and do that and then have them do it. You sort them, right? That's card sort. So there's some instructions there too online. So you can find all this free stuff as well. And that's usually very helpful that you can use some free things. So depending on your work situation, you may not have access to some of the more expensive career assessments. So these are some good ones to know about. John Holland's vocational personality typology. Obviously, we're going to kind of know about that one and kind of where you can find it for free. Career choice is basically an expression of your personality. So it's the idea that you're going to identify with your career basically, and that you're going to extend your personality into the realm of work. So who you are and what you do kind of align really well with each other. It meets your personal needs and provides you a satisfaction in who you are as a person as well. So it's that congruence between your identity and your work environment. The modal personality style is your preference, right? It's going to be what you want your occupation to be set within. So it's that congruence with self in your occupation. Again, this is a reliant on self-knowledge, self-awareness. So it's helping your clients be more self-aware of who they are so that they can have a career match. Career match. So let's go into these different pieces of the Holland's model personality typology. So he has these 6 pieces, this hexagon, right? And you take assessments and then you'll have a number that kind of matches and corresponds with these. And your Holland's code tends to have these 3. So your top ones and then the 2 coming after that. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more, kind of how differentiated you are versus undifferentiated, right? So how primary your first one is versus maybe sometimes they're not. So they can have different levels of correspondence with these different types. So realistic people tend to be pretty assertive and competitive. They tend to be interested in activities, motor coordination, skills, strength. They prefer problem solving and doing rather than talking about things or philosophizing, right? So they don't want to sit in meetings all day. They want to get out and do stuff. So they are very much concrete problem solving type people, and that's the environment that they're going to do best in. They don't really like abstract theories. They like pragmatic things. They're oftentimes interested in scientific fields or mechanical fields rather than like maybe aesthetic things. They like to work with things rather than work with people typically. So that's the realistic kind of typology. So if you score high in that, then you're going to be wanting to find a career that fits with those sorts of things. Investigative people like to think and observe rather than act. They like to organize information and understand information in order to persuade people or persuade. They oftentimes are trying to figure things out, right? They're looking for that information, organizing it, and trying to come up with conclusions based on that. They prefer individual rather than people-oriented activities. They like to work with data and information, right? So they want to like gather all this information and come up with conclusions. That's kind of the idea there. Artistic people tend to be that creative, open, original, perceptive, sensitive, independent. It can be kind of emotional. They do not like structure and rules. They do not like monotony. They don't really like tasks involving people or physical skills. They're more expressive with their emotions than others tend to be. They like to think, organize, and understand artistic and cultural areas. They like to be innovative, I believe, as well. So they like the ideas of new ideas and things, and they like to create. So that they're particularly good at working with ideas and things, creative, innovative sort of type. Social people tend to work well with people. They really are satisfying their needs through teaching or helping situations most of the time. So they are your teachers and helpers. They're different than the realistic or investigative types because they're drawn more to seek close relationships with other people, and they're less to be really intellectual or physically like thing oriented, right? They like to work with people. Enterprising people are good talkers. They use their skills to lead and persuade others. Leader type people, right? They value reputation, power, money, and status, and they usually go after it. So they're very driven, ambitious sorts of people. They like to work with people and data. The conventional people tend to like rules, regulations, and emphasize self-control. They like structure and order and predictability. They dislike unstructured, unclear things. So they're the type of people that want lots of directions on assignments, right? They place value on reputation, power, or status, and they like to work with data. So those are sort of the different things there, and you can have different combinations or different levels of these, as they put it, kind of. So as far as Holland's typology, there's some key concepts here, and this is kind of what I was talking about, that you can have different levels and different combinations of that. Consistency is basically the closer the types are on that hexagon, that six-sided figure there, the more consistent the individual will be. So if they're far apart, like on opposite ends, then you're less likely to be consistent. So you're less predictable. You may be indecisive, so you have a harder time picking and choosing careers that actually fit you well, because you haven't gotten this differentiated identity. So this is the next two pieces, right? Differentiated, those are people who fit into a pure type. The more you score, like the higher you score in that type, the more you have differentiated yourself to that type, and then you're less likely to resemble other types, right? Those who have poorly defined personality types are considered undifferentiated. They tend to be a little more indecisive when it comes to career. So they struggle more with this. So you're going to have clients who are like that and have maybe even scores in 3 areas or something, and that can be kind of tricky for them. Identity is basically the idea that you have a clear, stable view of yourself and abilities and goals. So you have a clear idea of yourself and your personhood and what you're wanting out of careers. Congruent is that personality, work environment match, right? And calculus is the idea that this theory and these 6 personality types are able to be researched and measured. So the statistical piece of that theory, right? Holland's personality typology is descriptive. So that means it's like a one-time, here's who you are sort of approach. It describes who you are in that moment as you take that assessment, right? It doesn't account for how personality types developed over time, right? It doesn't account for causes or impacts and influences in how you develop. It has mixed research results with diverse populations, but it has some empirical support, and its practical usefulness has been kind of established throughout time. It's been used quite a bit. It's a very common personality typology that you're going to see in career counseling. And it has some good empirical supports for the constructs, the 6 pieces, right? They're well defined, and there is a lot of research behind those because they are well defined, and there's kind of several decades of research on them. So you can look into that. So as far as assessing for this typology, there's different assessments that use Holland's typology, personality typology. The ones that you're going to probably use the most of those that are free and used often. So the self-directed search is the one you find on ONET, or it's based on the one on ONET, right? ONET is based on that. It's most widely used in several languages. So you're going to see these different ones. My vocational situation, I've seen that one before. So yeah, Hung's theory of personality. So we're going to shift gears a little bit here to Hung. So Hung, or Hungian career counseling, he has obviously a personality piece, and that's what we're going to talk about of his theory. So if you use Hung as your mental health counseling theory, this might be a good fit for you. But Hung has a theory of how personality interacts with the world and things as well. So he is his assessment, well, it's not really his assessment. The assessment based on his personality type is the Myers-Briggs type indicator. And of course, it's in the name. Myers and Briggs are the one that created that assessment. It is commonly used in career counseling. It's kind of got a fad following as well right now. So you'll see a ton of those types of personality assessments online that are free. The empirical support on them is probably not as good as the MBTI. So it is an extensive process. It has several different questions. There are a few different forms. I think that the shortest form has 60 questions. So the ones that you'll find online are probably different than that and probably shorter than that. So it's very similar to the Holland's typology. It ends up with having, instead of that 3-letter code and different combinations of that 3-letter code, it ends up with 16 personality types. And there's 4 letters in the Hung's codes, right? But his is also a little bit different, that it's not seen as like levels necessarily of congruence within those. It is a preference type. So you have a primary personality preference, and then that other one that you don't use as much is your compensatory preference. So you don't use it as often. If you do use it, you're going to be more emotionally drained, right? If you're using it, those sorts of things. So he made it a dichotomy. So you can't score in the middle, right? So it's not a spectrum. You can't score in the middle. You're going to be having one preference over another. So I believe when I took the Myers-Briggs the first time, I scored 1 point into intuitive. And I'm like, well, you know, if I saw it as a spectrum, I don't know where I'd fall. Either way, I could probably be both intuitive and sensing. And so depending on how you want to see that, but his idea is you can't be both. You have one primary personality preference and the other is a compensatory one. So there are several free versions. Like I said, there's a link to one there that you can use if you're interested in finding out your typology. So Hung's personality traits or preferences, you would call them preferences, right? Not traits, are here. Extroversion, so you've probably heard this a lot. It is oftentimes misunderstood. Extroversion, introversion, often misunderstood. So I'm going to go over some of them, but extroverts tend to like variety and action. And part of their reason there is that this is where they get energy. So this first dichotomy here, extroversion, introversion, is where you're going to get your energy resources from. So it's a source of energy, not necessarily how you interact with others. It can definitely influence how you interact with others because extroverts get energy from people and activities. So they like variety, they like action, they like socializing because they get energized by it. They tend to be faster, like fast-paced environments. They tend to like things that are quick, easy. So oftentimes they're maybe better at math problems, quick and easy, right? They don't like complicated procedures and things like that. They're often really great at greeting people because they have this energy with meeting new people. They like meeting new people. They like novice sorts of situations as well. They're often impatient and they don't like monotony. They do not mind being interrupted to answer a telephone while they're doing things. Those sorts of things don't bother them. They often act quickly, sometimes without thinking things through. They like to have people around. They communicate freely, openly. So there's different kind of types as well. So you'll see here EF, ES. So those combinations of those preferences lend themselves to different interactions and environments. So that's kind of important to know, that people don't really oftentimes realize that the combinations are also important in how they interact with the world. Introversion, again, they like quiet, and that's because they get energy from the internal mind and alone activities. So they like quiet and concentration. They like thinking. Thinking helps them feel energized, right? They tend to be careful with details, dislike sweeping statements. They don't make promises they don't intend to keep, right? They have trouble remembering names and faces. Huh, that's interesting. I have trouble remembering names. I'm into it. So I did not know that. They tend to mind working, they don't mind working on a project for a long period of time under, they don't like interruptions, right? They're interested in details, behind, they like thinking. So anything that has to do with that. Dislike telephone intrusions. They don't like texting, all those kinds of things that interrupt them. They have some problems communicating with others since lots of information is in their head. They have a lot of things going on in there. They tend to have lots of thoughts and are always thinking. They like to work alone. They think a lot before they make decisions. So again, that's your extrovert introvert kind of dichotomy there. And doesn't mean that you cannot do both those things, right? It means that one is more emotionally draining on you or taxing on you than the other. So it's your compensatory one. So you're going to struggle more if you choose a career that doesn't match that. Sensing, they focus on the here and now. This is how you take in information. So this dichotomy of sensing and intuition is how you take in information and make decisions. So sensing tends to get information from their external world. They're sensing things. They rely on standards to solve problems. They establish order. They are patient with routine details. They work steadily. They enjoy perfecting skills. They tend to be good at precise work. They like to create some new things by adapting something that already exists. So they like to take in information from the external world, right? Intuition is focusing on future and what might be. So very future oriented, not the here and now necessarily. This is kind of a gut reaction sort of thing. So they like to solve problems in new and unusual ways. They may not have all the facts to decide to make their decision right. They may not be able to explain why they decide what they decide because they are making kind of this future oriented kind of gut reaction sort of thing. They work in bursts of energy. They like learning new skills. They're patient with complex situation, impatient with routine details, particularly that extroversion and intuition together, like that. Monotony really bothers them. Right, so there's some different pieces here. You kind of get the idea that you can use this as far as matching careers with personality as well. The T, F, these are not in the right order. Sorry. So the T and the S, not to judging, I'm going to jump between those, are how you make decisions. So T's like to think analytically, logically. So there's a lot of like data gathering and they want facts before they make decisions. They tend to be very firm-minded and can get along without harmony. So if you disagree with them, that's okay. They're good with disagreeing. We agree to disagree because I'm not going to change my opinion because I made my opinion off facts. It's kind of how they tend to approach things. They tend to be impersonal sometimes and not necessarily paying attention so much to other people's feelings and thoughts and how their decisions impact them, which is kind of the opposite of the F type, right? So these are thinking, analytically minded, data sort of focused people. And the feeling people like harmony, they base their decisions based on how others are going to be impacted by the decision. So they are very aware of other people's feelings and how they situation impacts those feelings. So they're very sympathetic, very people-oriented sort of career choices would be good for them. Now, I'm going to go back to the last dichotomy, which is judging and perceiving. And this is how you tend to organize yourself within the world. So the judging types like to plan. So they are very future kind of oriented. They plan out their work. They like schedules, they like checklists. They're very organized sorts of approach to their career types. So they like to get things settled and finished before they start on other tasks as well. So they can be very task focused and task oriented people. So this is important as well. They may not notice new things that need to be done while they're doing something else. So very task focused oriented person. They don't really like interruptions either in their tasks. So they get satisfied by completing things. Perceiving tends to adapt well to change in situations. They kind of go with the flow sort of people. They prefer leaving things open for adjusting. So they don't need to have everything planned out in detail, right? They may postpone decisions, may start too many projects and have difficulty finishing them all. They may postpone unpleasant tasks, right? So these are your procrastinators to some extent. They want to know all about a new job. They tend to be curious, welcome new things and situations and people, right? So again, those are the hung personality type preferences that you're going to find in Myers-Briggs, but you will end up with a code of 4 of those, right? Your personality preferences of those 4 and dichotomies, and those are your personality types. So for example, my personality type is INFJ, according to assessment I took years ago. I would think that sometimes the S comes out as well, because I'm not very strong on the end. So the INFJ personality type is actually a counselor. So God, I picked a good career, right? So it's finding those different types that fit. Some now have like kind of code names with them, right? There are names that they fit. So like architect, enterpriser, those are names that fit certain Myers-Briggs typology codes. So you can find those online as well. So you can kind of find your code and kind of what career might fit you. And it talks even about like what relationships you can be in that would be helpful or not. So there's a lot of information on that. The Factor 5 model, or the Big 5, is another one that's really commonly used by career and work placement situations as well. So I wanted to cover it really quickly. So again, this one kind of is more formed on Gordon Allport's personality assessments again. Oh, it was 4,000 terms. See, I was wrong, the number. So 1936, Gordon Allport and Henry Odbert formed a list of 4,500 terms relating to personality traits. That has been narrowed down over time, right? So the father of trait theory had tons of personality traits that we could possibly have, right? In the 1940s, it was narrowed down to 16 traits, and then it was further reduced to just 5 traits by several researchers. McCrae and Costa are the ones that are typically associated with a Factor 5 model and have done a lot of research on a Factor 5 model. So McCrae and Costa is kind of, if you're looking for the research on that, they are very popular. We've done a lot of research there. So the Factor 5 model, or the Big 5, is a spectrum sort of model. So it's not like Hung's preferences, right? So in Hung's, it was just your one here, and then the other one, if you use it, you're compensating. You actually prefer that other one. And this is more on a spectrum of low to high. So it's just one term. You're either high or low in that one term. So like extroversion, for example, you're either high extroverted or low extroversion. That's it. There's no introversion dichotomy, right? And then you can relate different career pieces to that. So conscientiousness is the idea of your spectrum of how organized and disciplined you are, right? So you can be impulsive, disorganized, or you can be disciplined or careful, right? And you're a spectrum, you fall somewhere along that line that spectrum of conscientiousness, how organized and disciplined you are. So conscientiousness means basically doing what's right, following through with duty, and people who are highly conscientious are thoughtful. They have a good sense of self-control and are very goal-directed. Most conscientious people tend to be well-planned and assess risks, and maybe risk-taking isn't really something that they want to do. So they don't tend to do a lot of like business enterprising sort of things because they're very risk averse. It's not their strong take. So conscientious people tend to be highly organized, disciplined, risk averse sorts of career fields. Openness is the personality trait that prefers kind of it is whether you're high on openness and you're spontaneous, your new things don't bother you, like you're open to new experiences, new people, you're imaginative, spontaneous, versus low means you want routine, practical situations. You don't want new things to happen. So an openness, trying something new, learn something new, have broad range of interests. Open-minded people tend to be curious about the world, love to travel, they have great imagination or adventurous sorts of things, creative sorts of people. So high openness tends to have, lots of people around them, different people, like great at networking, right? High openness tends to flourish in jobs that, inspire creativity as well. So art, writing, innovation, those sorts of things. Those that are low tend to be in more careers that are routine, right? Have a lot of routine and possibly monotony. As far as extroversions, look at that one. So extroversion, again, is basically that social piece. Are you sociable, fun-loving, outgoing, versus reserved or thoughtful? Kind of that piece. So extroverts tend to make friends easily, network easily. They love social meetings, groups, gatherings, those sort of things. They can be great at sales, public relations, event planning, politics, personalities, teachers, those sorts of people, and careers are good for them. They tend to like to be the center of attention, those sorts of things. And then which one did I not get to? Agreeableness. Okay. Agreeableness does not necessarily mean exactly what it says, right? There is people who have a high trait of agreeableness tend to have a lot of concern for others. So again, it's that idea that they're taking other people's feelings into account. So they have a lot of empathy, concern for others, they're kind, they have some altruism value, trust, the affection for others. That's your agreeableness piece. People that tend to be high in agreeableness tend to be cooperative, kind of team oriented. Those who have low agreeableness tend to be more competitive, maybe manipulative at times, controlling, that sort of stuff. So good career choices for people who are high in agreeableness would be like a nurse, counselor, religious leader, teacher, nonprofit organization, charities, those are something where you're giving back to the community. Neuroticism tends to be characterized by basically the idea of how you regulate your emotions, right? Emotional instability would be high neuroticism versus low neuroticism, maybe more calm, confident, right? So if you feel anxious a lot of the time, you struggle to cope in stressful events, and your personality traits might be more neuroticism. Since the basic trait dimension of neuroticism worries too much, they may be successful in jobs that cause fewer worries. So you want to like lower stress job if you're high in neuroticism, something that doesn't give you a lot of pressure. Examples of these careers might be writer, artist, yoga instructor, freelance designer, and different pieces there. So again, a Factor 5 model is just looking at those factors of personality that may impact whether you're a good fit for different career environments. This is another way of doing this. So there's several different ones. These are some of the most common ones that you'll see in career counseling. So I wanted to cover some of them for you. So in summary of these just trait-oriented theories, you're looking to match aspects of an individual to their environment, their work environment. So what you're looking for, matching, a good match of who the person is that you're assessing now to their environment. You rely a lot on assessments of the factors that make up a person, right? And it doesn't account for development over time. So it's not a developmental theory. It's not a lifespan theory. It also doesn't necessarily account for systemic stuff, right? So you're not looking at the society around us or the systemic institutional things around us, policies, right? It's just looking at the individual and the environment. Those are two pieces. It's based on assumptions that there are best matches. There may be one great career goal for you, career choice for you. The goal is to develop, main goal of all of these approaches is to develop that self-awareness, that self-knowledge, so that you're improving your career choice, career selection. So it's knowledge about yourself and knowledge about careers that you're looking to help improve that, and then help them process all that knowledge that they're gaining from them about themselves with the knowledge that they have of careers to help them make a decision. So that is your trait-oriented theories, or your person environment fit theories, the main ones anyways. And if you have any questions, concerns, reach out to me.